Well, a short time ago on this very issue of wages, I caught up with the Finance Minister Simon Birmingham, began by asking whether workers would just have to cop wages being lower than inflation for the time being.
Well, no, Tom, we're saying that we should back the independent umpire, the Fair Work Commission, to make a decision based on all of the evidence that is presented to it. As a government, we have consistently provided detailed, comprehensive economic analysis and information to the Fair Work Commission to help them make this annual determination. And historically, the Labor Party has backed a similar approach that in both opposition and in government, previous Labor leaders have made submissions or statements calling for fair and economically responsible approaches. Now, Anthony Albanese has never bothered to make a submission as Labor leader. Now, rather than making a submission, he's come out under pressure with this statement. He needs to clarify today, is this official Labor Party policy? Will he be making a submission if a Labor government is elected, calling for a minimum 5.1% increase? If he is, what's the modelling or analysis that has underpinned that determination by the Labor Party? Will this indeed be a permanent position by Labor that the Commission should always meet the headline inflation rate? Why has he chosen the headline inflation rate, not the underlying inflation rate or a variation between? These are all the type of serious questions that Anthony Albanese needs to front up and answer.
Fair enough to put those questions to him. I'm sure it'll be asked a lot today. But my question for you is, if you're saying 5.1 is too high, which the Prime Minister has said, you are saying, just to be upfront about that, that for now, minimum wage workers have to go backwards.
Well, Tom, what we are saying very clearly is that the Independent Fair Work Commission should undertake the proper analysis and thorough scrutiny that it always does. And it should do so without being directed by government as to what a minimum outcome should be, but it should do so considering inflation, both headline and underlying circumstances of inflation, that it should consider the impact any decision would have on the jobs market, the impact any decision would have on future inflation. And the real risk in terms of the approach Anthony Albanese is proposing is that you create an inflationary spiral that only drives higher future inflation figures, and that then forces the Reserve Bank to push interest rates up even higher, and that Australia
Fair Work Commission still go about that process
we're seeing overseas.
But cool. Can I just get your view then? Is 5.1% too high?
Under a Labor position? Tom, I'm not going to prejudge the independent determination of the Fair Work Commission. That's not our government's approach. Our government's approach is that we have experts who we give all of the analysis and information to. We back the role of unions as we do the role of business organisations and other independent stakeholders to help inform that outcome and that determination. Anthony Albanese is the one who's put himself out pretending to be the nation's chief economist, saying that he has a figure that should be achieved. Well, if that's Albanese's chief economics figure, what's the underpinnings for it? How has he come to that determination? He's the one who's got to justify
that's fair enough for you to ask that of him, but I'm just asking your view, because you've heard some strong lines from Scott Morrison calling this reckless. Is that the number itself? Do you have any view at all at 5.1? Is that too high?
It's the approach that is reckless, Tom. The approach where you saw the press conference unfold yesterday and you've listened to Mr Albanese over a period of months, if not years, in which he's consistently previously said, much the same as I have, that it's a matter for the Independent Fair Work Commission. Then yesterday, under pressure, in a press conference, he got pushed to the point where he said, yes, absolutely, to a particular figure. So was this a considered position or a made-up-on-the-spot position?
Are we getting a bit...
that it was another stumble or fumble from him.
OK, so you won't have a view on the actual 5.1. Are we getting a bit carried away with the difference between this figure and, for example, big business and business submissions? They say 3%. The difference between those figures, one would be 60 cents an hour, one would be $1 an hour. Is that really going to be catastrophic for the economy?
Well, Tom, you do have to contemplate all of the implications that flow through. For many parts of the economy, any increase in wages will result in a flow-through and increase in prices. And if it results in a flow-through and increase in prices, it results in a commensurate flow-through of increase in inflation again. If you get that cycle happening, well then where does it stop, as many economic commentators have highlighted today? It's why the Fair Work Commission needs to take the time to consider the causes of inflation, the impacts the decision would have on inflation, on interest rates, on jobs growth. There's not much point in the Fair Work Commission making a decision that might put wages up, but if it means fewer people are actually in jobs and interest rates go up even higher and inflation goes up even higher, what you end up with is Australians far worse off at the end of that decision. Now, that's why they need to weigh all of the evidence, and having a potential Prime Minister who makes it up on the spot is an incredibly dangerous thing to have.
Just want to get to one other topic. Before COVID, the government's mantra was getting back in the black. And that was through, if it were going to happen, controlled spending. It was 24.5% of GDP. It's now above 27%, even post the need to support the economy with COVID. And that's until 2025, 27%. What happened to spending restraint?
Well, John, we have managed over the last couple of years to bring spending down, payments from government down, by the largest two decreases that you've seen from a government in the last 50 years.
But that's only because of massive increases.
The biggest.
I just want to compare this figure. It's 24.5 before COVID,
like JobKeeper,
and now it's 27% now. That's the more relevant comparison. Why has it gone up so much?
So there is an adjustment, certainly, that has had to come through. And we have also been quite upfront in dealing with issues such as the NDIS that we have committed to fully funding, and we've made sure that the budget fully reflects the actuarial assessments of the NDIS. Now, that puts pressure on budgets. There's no doubt about that, and it's why you have to show restraint in other decisions that you make to be able to continue the type of improvements to the budget bottom line that we had in the recent budget. In the recent budget, we had the biggest improvement to a budget bottom line in more than 70 years. We managed to bring down projected deficits by $103 billion. And that's a function of having stronger economic growth that has enabled us to improve the rate of budget repair compared with what had been forecast only a few months earlier.
OK, but again, those forecasts of these were astonishing highs.
We also have to show restraint.
Yeah, but that's the thing I want to get to, restraint. So what about this figure in billions? Spending in the last year before COVID, $478 billion. Spending next financial year, $625 billion. This is way past any sort of COVID support. That's an increase of $147 billion. Something seems to be broken there with spending restraint.
And Tom, as I indicated, you look at the NDIS that we're fully funding and taking those actuarial assessments into account, and we've put that into the budget.
That's a few billion out of 147.
Well, Tom, that has pushed total NDIS expenditure forecasts above the expenditure on Medicare, which we're also fully funding, but it shows the rate of growth in a program like that. The $19.2 billion of investment that we've made in aged care. Now, crucially, at this election, whilst, yes, we have had to front up to those real spending pressures in aged care, in the NDIS, in healthcare generally, and in defence, the Labor Party proposes to go even further. So what we can see on the Labor side is some announced spending promises, but also then a lot of very vague areas of spending promises. We've estimated around $302 billion of additional spending pressures when you take into account Labor Party
we'll get the Labor costings
on areas like JobKeeper or refugees or the like.
We'll get costings
I'm not so sure we will.
Well, I'm sure we will before the election.
Honestly, some of those other vague promises.
All right. Well, let's talk about them on the day they come out. Perhaps we'll hope to have you again on the program. We've got to leave it there. We're short on time. Finance Minister Simon Birmingham, thanks for your time.